So there's a couple things you need to do before you put in your new stereo. First is to familiarize yourself with the wiring. There's a couple different things you can do. What I like to do whenever you can find it is buy the little adapter plugs that plug directly into your factory wiring. Alright, this is what I was talking about with the wire adapter. This is the wire set that plugs into the new radio, and you see it's all labeled what each wire goes to. So one option is just to literally individually wire these into your vehicle. You need to know which wire is which, obviously, which could involve some testing unless you've got a very accurate wiring diagram and you know it's correct. The other option, like I said, you actually are going to solder these to this adapter, and this adapter just connects directly to your vehicle, so you don't have to do anything in the vehicle, and you retain the vehicle's stock connections if you ever wanted to pull your radio out and put the factory one back in. If you can't find the adapter plug that fits your car, then you're going to have to decide whether you want to cut wires or tap into wires. And obviously there's pros and cons to doing all that, but anyway, so there's that. And then if you've got any kind of DVD player, typically there's going to be screws that are holding things that you need to remove before you ever install. And then the last thing I like to do is test fit before I get too involved in this, make sure that it works. I've eyeballed this next to the factory radio, and this one is smaller, so there shouldn't be any problems, but I'm going to go ahead and just test fit it here real quick before I get too involved. Make sure that there's nothing that is going to have to be customized in the vehicle that's maybe not apparent to just looking at it. So to do this test fit, I've got to move this iPod wiring out of the way for the time being. And I'm just going to push the antenna down and slide on in there. And it appears that it should fit. It has a little bit of wiggle room there, so I can get this lined up with the trim piece and make sure that when I put it back together, the trim isn't covering, say, the disc opening slot there, or part of the screen, or knobs or buttons or whatever. But I'm thinking this is going to work just fine. What I've noticed with these off-brand products, the instructions are usually poorly translated from another language to English, and so it helps if you kind of have a ballpark idea of how things are supposed to go, because usually the instructions they give you are not clear enough. If you're not familiar with how wiring works, it won't make sense. For example, to trigger the backup camera, it probably requires power from when the car's in reverse. Typically it's sensing positive or hot wire on your backup lights that triggers the camera to kick on, and so you may need to have that wire both at the camera location as well as something on this unit to trigger it to switch to that setting. Otherwise you won't have a backup camera, obviously. So knowing that in advance, sometimes it's helpful if you pre-wire. Some of them, the cable from the camera to here has that wire built into it. Sometimes you got to run a separate wire, so things like that. The other thing, sometimes these will not play the video unless you're in park or have the brake on or things like that. And so knowing that usually looks for a ground. And so you can either permanently ground that trigger wire on here, which won't affect your vehicle, but it will allow the movie to play all the time. If you're somebody that's easily distracted when driving, that's probably not a good idea. If you can handle having the movie playing and your passengers are watching it and you're fine driving, then you can probably get away with that. So just different things like that that aren't going to be well explained in the instructions, and I will try to, as we're making this video, point those things out as we're going. That's the downside to not being able to have one of these that's already pre-coded for you, tells you exactly what to connect to what. Because all of these mean different things. Front right plus, right rear minus, and so forth. Those are all speakers. ACC is power when you have the key turned on. B plus is your battery power, probably powers the clock. If I don't go buy a connector, I'll probably cut one of these off, solder these to the wires, then that would plug into the car, this would plug into the new radio. Fine. This is the GPS antenna, and I need to make sure that this cord that came with it is long enough to reach from the back of here, and I would say back of here comfortably, because you need to be able to remove the radio, attach it, put it back in. So if it's really snug or deep in there, you're going to have problems when you're trying to put this together. I need to route the wiring wherever I'm likely to do it and make sure that this antenna that I just dropped, that this antenna will reach wherever I'm going to put it. And since I've never done a GPS one, I don't know if it has to be on glass or outside the vehicle or grounded or whatever, so I'm going to find all that out. The Avalanche has 2 built-in antennas already, and so I'm probably going to try to put this wherever one of the factory ones is, so there won't be any new visible things. It'll look like it came with the vehicle. Prior to totally finalizing that, I may just sort of put this in somewhere just for now, depending on how much time this takes. When you're doing a video, it's always slower than when you're doing this for real, because I got to worry about where the camera is and did the shot come out and all that stuff. So anyway, so I'm going to pre-test the length of the wire here. I'm also going to do the same thing with the backup camera, being that this is a Avalanche. It's the same length as a full-size pickup or Suburban. It's very, very possible that the backup camera that they provided wire is not long enough. I find that all the time. So if you run into that problem, you may have to cut this and then solder in extra wiring depending on the situation. Not everything is that simple, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm going to test fit, and once we've determined that we have enough wiring, then I'll probably start the installation process. Alright, I got it fished through here for test fitting purposes. I wanted you to see how it is. So I've got it where it's enough play that it can come out here, attach the radio, and then go back in. I actually found it kind of passes through there to over here, so I fished it up through there, and obviously this wire wouldn't be hanging down when this is a final job. This is just for test fitting purposes. And then I ran it, and the final I may actually run it totally under the steering wheel instead of over the speedometer, because there's actually plenty of cord here. But I ran it up there, and then I'm going to pull this pillar trim off, and from reading it just pulls straight out, so that should be easy. And then I test fit it up here for now, but as you can see, it's hanging down. Plenty of length that can go to either of the factory antenna locations that are up on the roof already, so I'm happy that they gave me a long enough cord and I don't have to do any custom work on that. And like I said, I'll probably, now knowing that I've got plenty of cable, I will probably reroute this wire so that instead of going across the top of there, it'll go down underneath the steering wheel here, where you see I've already done some other wires on past projects. Okay, this is the backup camera that came with the stereo that I bought. Obviously it's a real basic, inexpensive one, thus it was free. But I'll tell you one thing that I'm seeing here that I like. It looks like they gave plenty of cord to reach from the stereo to the back of the truck. I haven't read the instructions. I probably don't need to read the instructions, but I can tell quite a few things just by looking at this from having done this so many times in my life. You got your camera here. It's got a power connector and then a video output. But what's nice about this one is, I don't know if you can tell there, but there's a red and a black wire going into here. And I would just about bet that the red wire on there tells the stereo to turn the TV part on to show the rear camera. And I'm betting that this wire here, you connect the red to your hot on your backup lights and you ground the black. Connect this to the red, connect that to there, and then connect that to the back of the stereo. So they actually did us a favor by giving us this camera. And the other thing that's nice about that is you can probably very easily replace this camera with something better without having to touch all this wiring. So once this wiring is in your stereo, the only part you'd be messing with is back here. Now, saying that, if you buy another camera that doesn't give you output on here for this power, you may have to cut that and tap it into your power, but that's an easy fix too. So anyway, like I said, it looks like they gave us enough wire. Probably what I'd have to do, you see I've tore this apart a little bit. This piece just pulls out just like that trim piece did. When you put it back in, you go top first and then bottom. But anyway, I may run the camera from down there, maybe run it under the seat and then out to the back that way. That's one option. The other thing I thought about when I was talking earlier about doing the GPS antenna to the outside, and I thought, well, I'll just temporarily wire it up. Problem I thought of immediately is I pulled that trim piece off, and so if I drop the wire down into the back of the stereo and just have the antenna side loose, I may not be able to fit that through something. So I'm probably going to go ahead and pull down the headliner here and try to start from the outside of the vehicle and fish the small side of the antenna through rather than so I'm glad I caught that before I got into this project, because I wasn't thinking about that at the time, and obviously hopefully it saved you that trouble too. So I'm going to start from the outside of the vehicle, try to fish just the connector side through, which is real small, and like I said, route it around the steering wheel and back behind the stereo, and should be enough room for it to fit.